Hi there, my name's Anna Howells and you're joining 1kWith, Kaleidoscope's latest venture, a series of 1,000-second conversations with interesting people from across health and care. And who are Kaleidoscope? We are a social enterprise that has been set up to bring people together to improve health and care. And a lot of our work focuses on conversations and talking about what's important. And this has brought us to 1kWith. And today we are delighted to be joined by Helen Buckingham as our first guest. Helen is currently Director of Strategy and Operations at the Nuffield Trust, but has an amazing background in the NHS. And Helen, I think it's fair to say that if we were playing a game of health organisation bingo, you'd probably win with roles at NHS Improvement, the Chief Executive of Primary Care Trust. And there was one more in there as well, was it?
I've worked in Mental Health Trust, I was at Health Authority, Monitor, and now Nuffield, I think tank.
Absolutely, so yeah, definitely winning the health organisation bingo game. And to fill our 1,000-second opportunity with Helen, we've asked her to share 3 moments throughout her life which have brought her to where she is today. We'll also be asking a number of surprise questions which are in this exciting bowl before us. But I think to get started, Helen, over to you for your first moment, if that's okay.
Thanks, Anna. I've been giving some thought to this, and I have a quite loose definition of a moment.
Okay.
So I kind of period in my career, a defining thing. Yeah. The first one I thought of was my experience back in 1997 when I was newly in post as the Assistant Director of Finance in Barnet Health Authority, just post the 97 general election, which brought Labour to power. And we were reviewing the future of Edgware Hospital.
Right.
So Edgware had been a district general hospital that just before the election, the announcement had been made it was going to be downgraded to a community hospital, and the local community were up in arms. And working then with somebody that I found a very inspirational Chief Executive, Judy Hargaden, she took the decision, working with partners, to do a very innovative approach to reviewing that decision. Not the decision to downgrade per se, but what was going to actually be delivered in the hospital. And what we did was we worked with a group of 150 stakeholders, public, private, the clinicians, politicians, the lot. And we said to them, we've got this much money, we've got this much capital, we've got this much land. You can't have a full-blown A&E, that was a given.
Okay.
But other than that, over you to decide what you want. And my role in that process was to lead the finance discussions. And it was a really formative experience for me in terms of the power of a really genuine engagement and conversation with communities. So rather than going out to people and saying, this is what we've decided, what do you think? Or even, this is what we're considering, what do you think? It was actually about giving the power over to them. And they ran with it. It was really still, 20 years on, one of the hardest pieces of work I've ever done.
Yes.
But at the end of it, we came out with a prioritised list of services. We had the Hands Off Our Hospital campaign changing its name to the New Edgware Hospital campaign. And the people who've been a part of that, then working with that health system for the next 10 years, it takes a long time to build a hospital, the next 10 years holding that system to account for delivering what they've decided. And Tony Blair came back in 2007 and opened the New Edgware Community Hospital. Fantastic. Really, really powerful experience in terms of good public engagement and a good use of the range of all the professional skills in the NHS, so bringing in my finance skills as well as the input of clinicians and other leaders.
Absolutely, that sounds like a fascinating process to be a part of and to lead. And when you were engaging with people involved in that, was it very new for them? Had they been kind of given that opportunity or asked before?
It was new for everybody. So it was new for those who was running it, and it was new for the people who were experiencing it. I mean, obviously the NHS has done public consultation in some way, shape or form for many years, but actually to have a deliberative process that worked over a period of time that treated everybody who was part of that process as equals was quite new, and a lot of what we had to do at the beginning was to get people's heads around the idea that they were equals, that they had a value, and this wasn't just a decision that was going to be made by important people in a darkened room, it was a decision that was going to be made by them.
And do you say 150 kind of stakeholders involved? I mean, how did you get all those voices kind of to be heard in the room? Go round one by one, or
we did it in a series of different ways. So we had 3 big plenary meetings at the RAF Museum in Hendon.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, I was there again quite recently with family and kind of looking around, going, yeah, this feels familiar. So 3 big plenary sessions, which we ran in various different ways, and I can talk about one of those. But then we also had a lot of working groups in between. So we got people to say actually what were they particularly interested in being involved with, and between those 3 plenary meetings, obviously a lot of work happened with individuals. But to give you an example of what happened in one of the big meetings, something that I did, I said we've got so much money and we've got so much land. In the second of the 3 big meetings, we devised a game, and I ran a game, which absolutely gave people counters that represented the money and the land and the capital. And running up to that, we'd worked with people on actually what was the big list of services they might want to see, and working through an idea of actually what might they cost and how much space would they take up. And we basically said to people, here's the information. Go build yourselves a hospital. You use your counters, trade. You can trade your land capital counters for capital counters, and decide what you want.
I bet that was a really fun exercise to be a part of. Were there kind of surprise results, or did people vote the way you thought they would? It
took them a little while to get into it, but they ran with it. Not so much from that day, but actually from the outcome of the whole process. And I said we had a prioritised list of services. It was pretty much identical to the proposition that the Health Authority came up with previously.
Interesting.
But owned by the people who were actually engaged with it.
I'm not sure if I'm surprised by that or not. Thank you, Helen. It's time for our first surprise question. If you'd like to pick one out, and then I'll read it to you, if that's all right. Here we go.
It's like tombola, isn't it? Am I going to get the talcum powder?
Thank you very much. So your first question is, what one piece of advice would you give someone starting out in the health and care world today?
Really get your head around the idea that the health and care world is not just about hospitals, and look at it through as many different lenses as you can. So you'll be in a job, think about it through that role, but absolutely think about it through the eyes of the patient. And go and spend time in different bits of the system and talking to people about actually what they do and working through how it all fits together. Something like 90% of what happens in the health and care system happens outside hospitals. And that's not just about what happens in a GP practice. So really take a bit of time to stand back and understand what the system looks like through the eyes of the patient and the professionals who are working in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things when you're perhaps outside the health and care world, what people view as the NHS or what counts as the NHS is often very different to kind of what's involved.
People recognise a hospital and they see a GP and they get that, but there's so much more that goes on.
So it's finding those roles that allow you to think of it more likely, perhaps. That's brilliant, thank you. Shall we move on to your second defining moment?
Yes. Now this one's not quite as upbeat as the first. In the late 2000s, I was the Director of Strategy and Performance at Mental Health Trust in Bedfordshire and Luton. And in, I think it was 2007, we had a moment which sadly a number of people working in mental health services will recognise, which was that one of our service users committed a murder, and he murdered a policeman. Now, I've spent a lot of my career working in mental health services, and I've loved it. I've got a lot from it. This was an experience that was a very difficult experience, but I also got a lot from, because I was the Director of Strategy and Performance. I led our internal investigation into what had happened, and what had led to that. And I won't go into all the details; it's in the public domain. But the policeman who was killed, PC John Henry, was out in Luton early one morning, and our service user stabbed him. And looking back at the investigation, it was very clear. We did our own investigation, was an external investigation, both reaching the same conclusion that this could have been prevented. Maybe not absolutely in that moment, but there were a whole series of decisions that were taken without proper consideration of risk and accountability. And essentially it was a systemic failure across the whole of the commissioning and provision system and in the trust itself that resulted in one man losing his life and another man being imprisoned in a secure hospital for life, and obviously the impact of their families as well. And that really brought, it's the kind of thing you know intellectually, but it really brought home to me the fundamental importance of thinking about the consequences of the decisions that you make, whether they're the decisions you make as an organisation or as an individual. Thinking about risk. Now, it's not the same as being risk averse. And one of the things that I've really appreciated from all the time I spent in mental health services is how to consider positive risk taking. So I think it's really important to be risk aware rather than risk averse, but you do need to be risk aware. And you really need to think about accountability. So one of the things that really came out of this investigation was that a service had been decommissioned. So the PCT had taken that decision. It was a PCT that was in a very dire financial position at a time when it wasn't normal to be in a dire financial position. And they'd taken a decision to decommission the service. Probably wasn't the right decision. But regardless of whether or not it was the right decision, the way it was implemented in the trust was not good. And there was a tendency in the trust to say, well, actually, it's not a problem, it's the commissioners, they took the decision. It wasn't us. Well, actually, no, you can't back away from that. You can say this isn't the right thing to do. You can protest. If a decision like that is made, then you work through actually how to manage that in the best possible way. And we didn't, as an organisation, we didn't do that. And that had consequences both organisationally and individually. So not only did we not manage that properly as an organisation, the circumstances around the care of Tennis and Obi, the service user, again, there was a lack of thought as to the consequences of this decision. And it was I hadn't thought about it for a long time. And it was only really when you asked me to do this, and I was thinking about those moments and thinking about what are the experiences I've had that have fundamentally changed my practice. That kind of came back to me as one of them in terms of thinking about decision making, thinking about accountability.
I mean, reviewing that case, it sounds like it'd be an extremely difficult process, but also, as you say, one you can kind of learn a lot from. And those words of risk and accountability, I think we use a lot in health and care. And just going forward in your career, talking about, not being risk averse, but also being risk aware, translating that into practice in other organisations, has that been kind of difficult to bring people on board to how you view it?
One of the things that I've kind of learned in the NHS generally is that we have what I call magic words, and they have two connotations to me. One is that they're words that people say and they think that just the act of saying them makes the thing happen. So integration is an example. But the other, and actually integration is another good example of this, is that they're words that I use and I mean something, and you use and you mean something, and we don't test
whether we mean
the same thing. So one of the things that I've really learned to do, and risk is one of those things, is really to test whether, when I'm having a conversation with people about a decision or an action, whatever, that actually whether we do have the same attitude to risk. And it kind of doesn't matter if we don't have the same attitude at the beginning, but what does matter is that we have that explicit conversation, we understand what the risks are, and we work through that. And actually, generally speaking, people have appreciated those conversations.
Just taking that time at the beginning to kind of sense check, I guess. Brilliant. Thank you, Helen. Time for surprise question number 2.
Right.
Your favourite
taking
part.
risks.
Speaking of.
Right.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Ooh, this is a good one. If you had to pick a new Secretary of State for Health tomorrow, who would you like it to be?
Oh, goodness. Obviously, it's not beyond the realms of possibility the way politics are looking at the moment, is it?
Quite.
I think I don't want to pick a politician.
Okay.
I could think of politicians, but actually, whatever I say, picking a politician is a political statement.
Yes, that's very true.
And I think the job of Secretary of State for Health is a fascinating one. Like Jeremy Hunt used to say, it was the best job in government. Whether he still says that, I don't know. But I think it would benefit from being done by somebody who's got a really good grasp of how the whole system operates. Kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, through the eyes of the patient. And somebody that has undertaken a number of roles in the health and care system, and who I really admire, both for her ability, and it is her ability to do that, and her ability to connect with people at all levels, whether it is the patient, whether it's politicians, whether it's leaders in national organisations or members of staff, is Andrea Sutcliffe, who's recently gone from the Care Quality Commission to be the Chief Exec of the NMC. I think I would be fascinated to see how Andrea handled that role.
Yeah, I think she has some of the qualities needed.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Maybe we'll have to get in touch with Andrea after this.
Oh, I think she'd be a great interviewee.
Yeah, okay. That's very helpful. Thank you, Helen. Let's move on to moment number 3.
Number 3. Well, this is slightly different from the first two in 2 ways. So the first 2 were kind of stretching the definition of moment. And they were things that involved a lot of other people as well. The third one that I thought about was very definitely a moment. So we all have those people that we remember in our careers. And I mentioned in my first example, the then Chief Exec, Judy Halgerden, who was a very inspirational person. So the moment I'm thinking of was when I was in an appraisal conversation with somebody. I was doing the appraisal. And I suddenly realised that for that person, I was one of those people.
Okay.
I was one of those people that had an impact or that they remember in their careers. And I said a rude word in my head, and I swallowed hard, and I carried on with the conversation. But it really made me sit back afterwards and think about, actually, if that is the case, what does that mean? And I think we don't always recognise when we're in leadership positions how much we're on show, and how much people do pay attention to what we say and do. And that can be paying attention and saying, actually, I'm never going to do that, just as much as it can be paying attention and saying that's a really good thing to do. But it really it's made me stop and think about what I project. And it also made me think more, and I do this very consciously, that I actually do get quite a lot of people coming and saying, can I talk to you about X? I'm thinking about and I will. No, I think I am right in saying this. I will never say no. I would always give time to somebody who wanted my advice, because I think it's an enormous honour and a privilege that people will do that. And I have, as you kind of said when you introduced me, I have got quite a wide range of experience. I have got thoughts and opinions, and I'm very happy to share those. But it's not about me as the great leader dispensing my wisdom. It's actually about saying, people have felt me in my career. There have been those people that I've looked at and I've talked to and I've learned from. If I can be that for somebody else, well, fantastic. And there is nothing better than seeing somebody that has come and talked to you, and they perhaps you've helped a little bit. Absolutely fly.
Amazing, and I think definitely it's a lovely thing to be asked, isn't it? But also, that kind of concept of being able to realise the impact that you're having, and perhaps some of the smaller things which you don't quite realise people are really taking on board and listening to. That is a lovely final moment. Thank you, Helen. We have time for one more quick question, if that's okay.
All right. Pick carefully.
Lovely, thank you. So the final surprise question is, I'm very pleased it's this one. What one book should everyone read?
You keep getting those questions, don't you? I can't remember. Have you been asked to do the 7 books things on Twitter? Yes. No, which I have. And it's terrible because I read everything and all the time. I do struggle to think of one book. But one book that I have recommended to a few people is the book that Tim Smith wrote about the Eden Project. It's not the Eden Project. And it's one that sticks in my mind because it's not, at least I don't think, it was written as a book on leadership. But actually there is a load of stuff in there that you can take from as a leader. The sorts of things that he thinks about in terms of actually his role as a chief exec, and he'd never been a chief exec, and what is all this about, and how does this work? How he engaged with the public, and go back to my intro experience, how he engaged with the public in developing the Eden Project, how he built relationships with all the different organisations he needed to do that with to get it off the ground, and just the concept and the drive behind it. And it's a really good read. So it's probably, if you ask me tomorrow, I might think of a different one. But that is one that I have recommended to a few people. Brilliant.
I mean, I haven't read that one, but it sounds fascinating. And as you say, kind of read across to perhaps many.
There's a lovely anecdote in it where they get to the point of the opening of the project, and they're thinking about who they should have to do the grand opening.
Yeah.
And during the course of the building, the chief engineer had said something about actually this being something that he'd really like to show his grandchildren.
Oh.
So they got to the opening, and they got to the point in the ceremony where, grand person is supposed to appear, and everybody's looking. And they turned to the chief engineer and said, "Your grandchildren are here."
Oh, no way.
And asked him to do the opening.
Oh, that's so lovely. Yeah, that is brilliant. That is a lovely note to end on, because we are fast out of time, but a great takeaway for everyone to go pick up this book. So that's brilliant. Thank you, Helen, so much for joining us and sharing 1,000 seconds with us. Thank you all for watching. Please do join the conversation on Twitter, #1kWith, and do get involved that way too. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.